Well, Chris, I appreciate you. I know there's a lot kind of going on around the SEC every weekend and during the season, but for us here in Columbia, the focus is obviously on South Carolina, Mizzou. For what's just looking at the matchup, the first things that jump off to you about what we should be paying attention for in this game.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is maybe how different we perceive these two teams now versus a month ago. I mean, it's just an ever evolving world here, and I don't I think with all the losses that Missouri had on the offensive side, you're wondering how good that team's going to be. Well, Bo Pribula's certainly surprised us with what he's been able to do, both in terms of his running ability and passing ability. Ahmad Hardy's been a huge storyline for Missouri. And then you look at the flip side. I mean, a week ago, South Carolina is the number 11 team in the country. LaNorris Sellers has been struggling prior to getting knocked out of that ball game. But I think the biggest thing for South Carolina is the defense. And I know you were replacing a lot of important pieces, particularly on that defensive line. But giving up 31 points last week to Vanderbilt and not really having, I know you could say, hey, you don't have LaNorris Sellers, and maybe that's part of the equation. But the defense didn't have much, and LaNorris Sellers didn't play defense the last time I checked.
No, he didn't. He probably could. He's quite an athlete, but
Yeah,
no, he
right.
he didn't. So on that note, Missouri's offense has been high flying. The defense has been the question. What do you think is going to be the biggest, I guess, area of importance from the defensive side to try and handle this Mizzou offense?
I think you got to stop the run game. Everything starts with this offense over the last few years with that outside zone game that Drink and Kirby Moore find to be so important. They've got the right guy in not only Ahmad Hardy but Jamal Roberts as well. Two really good running backs that feel very comfortable in this scheme. And when you have success running that opens up the play action opportunity. So what they're going to want to do is have success running, and then take some shots down the field. So it starts by stopping the run. That defensive line that I talked about for South Carolina, even though they don't necessarily have the pieces from last year, have to find a way to be disruptive up front, to get penetration, and get Jamal Robertson and Ahmad Hardy down before they start building up a head of steam. Because you go back and watch the highlights last week. Ahmad Hardy was like old school, like Earl Campbell or something, dragging people. So hitting him in the backfield before he gets a head of steam up is important.
All right, on the opposite side with the offense, through those first couple games, even with LaNorris Sellers, it still looked a little bit choppy. There'd be a good drive to start the game, maybe, and then things would slow down. And then in the last game when he went out, the offense completely disappeared. From sort of a lens out national perspective, how are you viewing this offense? Because I know here in Columbia, people are ready to sound the alarm bells.
Yeah. I think it's very similar to my alma mater, living down in Gainesville. Everybody had these high expectations for both of these quarterbacks, and DJ Lagway and LaNorris Sellers. And right now, it doesn't look like they're living up to maybe the expectation. But there's a lot of blame to go around. I think you look at the offensive line. The offensive line has not been very good. They haven't protected LaNorris Sellers very well to this point. The run game hasn't necessarily had the impact that it needs to take off some of the pressure from LaNorris Sellers. So it starts up front. I think they've got to do a good job of protecting LaNorris. They got to hit some shots down the field too. There was zero explosiveness in the passing game last week. But I will say this, in going back and watching the tape, there was some rhythm offensively before LaNorris went out of the ball game, and they need to get back to that. If you look at the first drive against Virginia Tech, and again last week against Vandy, very rhythmic, very well scripted, right down the field. So being able to take advantage of some of that success is going to be important. But obviously, LaNorris Sellers is the key to any offensive production that South Carolina is going to have.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this South Carolina team, outside of last year, which was a great game here in Columbia, the other Columbia against Mizzou, but it has struggled to beat Missouri, especially in Missouri. What is kind of the challenging for them going into that stadium, into the other Columbia, and trying to pull out a win?
Yeah, I think Drink is owed a lot of credit for what he's been able to create there. This has become like a real SEC home field advantage. And I've gone there early in their years in the SEC, and it didn't necessarily feel like an SEC game. It's a must-have ticket. I think they've sold out, 16, 17 ball games in a row. And this is one where I think Missouri looks at it as, hey, this is an opportunity for us to continue to stay hot. I don't think a lot of people felt like they were potential contenders in the SEC championship race, but you win this ball game at home, you hold serve, you got to win your home games. This opens up the opportunity for them potentially to be undefeated when Alabama rolls into town a couple weeks from now. So this is This is an important one. I think for both teams, South Carolina needs to have success early to put some doubt in the minds of Missouri, but also to let themselves have a little confidence in that they maybe aren't as bad as what they've played the last couple of weeks.
And I know it's still early, a couple weeks into the season, just 1 week into conference play, but as it sits right now, where do both these teams, in your mind, sort of stack up in the SEC, and how can that change this weekend?
Yeah, again, I want to go back and put this out there. Like, I'm hard on my alma mater at Florida. I had Florida at 14 last week in the power rankings. I had South Carolina at 15. Part of that has to do with the expectation that I had for both teams. Both rosters have a lot of talent on them. They just got to find a way to stop shooting themselves in the foot. I went back and again watched those first couple drives last week. You get a bad snap that ends up being a 20-yard loss. I think on the second possession, you got a tight end that's laid off the ball that allows penetration and hits it back in the backfield. So football is the greatest sport in all the world because it requires all 11 people to do their individual jobs for everybody else to have success. So both Florida and South Carolina have to clean things up. I think they have a chance to move up into maybe the middle of the tier of this conference if they can do that. I honestly believe with the Missouri, what they've shown me on offense and what we know them to have defensively, and a schedule that's much more manageable than both South Carolina and Florida and a lot of the other teams. I think they could be, a top five SEC team that ends up 9-3 or 10-2 by the end of the day.
I could definitely see it. And it's a little bit of an aside, but you mentioned it with Lagway and Sellers, and we've seen it with Manning, and we cover Clemson as well with Cade Klubnik. Why was everyone so wrong this offseason about the quarterbacks that should have been thriving this year?
Yeah, I have no idea, man. It's crazy to think about, what those guys have kind of struggled with. And meanwhile, nobody thought Joey Aguilar was going to come into the league and have the success that he's had so far. So maybe some of it has to do with pressure. I'm anxious to see what Aguilar continues to do now that the spotlight's on him a little bit more. But again, as much as we talk about quarterbacks, and they do get probably more the blame that they deserve when things go bad, and they probably more credit when things go well. There's a lot of other failures in each of those situations you talked about. Everybody else has not necessarily done their part to help the quarterback look as good as they need to.
Yeah, and on that note, so I'm a Penn State alumni, so I'm an alma mater from there. I don't know if you watch too much Big Ten football, but with the way Bo Prabula's been playing, did Penn State keep the wrong quarterback?
I mean, there could be an argument for that to be made. I'll be honest, I didn't know a ton about him prior to coming in. I knew he was kind of the second option as a running quarterback at Penn State. Been really impressed in terms of his arm strength, his accuracy, knowing where to go with the football. I think this offense at Missouri, it's a good chance, even though you lost Brady Cook last year and Luther Burden and Theo Weiss, that they could be better this year because of what you have with Purbuell and his dual threat capabilities, what you have in Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts, what you have with this new group of receivers. Kevin Coleman coming back to the state of Missouri has had a huge impact on what they're doing. So I'm high on this Missouri team right now, and a lot of it has to do with what Purbuell has brought to the offense.
Yeah, and he has an interesting story. He's from Pennsylvania, grew up a Penn State fan, and just knew he was never going to get that shot to be the starter. And now he's kind of doing what Will Howard did at Ohio State,
Yeah.
kind of sticking it to him and having a great career somewhere else. So it's been interesting. Last question for you. I know they're announcing it tonight at 7. I don't know if you're going to be involved with the SEC annual opponents. Do you have any inside scoop for maybe either of these teams on who they might be seeing every year? Is it not coming out till
I
7?
don't. I wish I did, man. I want that information is embargoed, so I don't know. I'm anxious to find out. Like for all of these teams, I'm anxious to find out for my alma mater too. So it's one I think the SEC never fails to make headlines year round, whether you're in season or out. There's a lot of interest, and so I know we'll all be watching.
All right, for you, for Florida, and give me one for South Carolina. What in your mind you go? That's a team they got to play in your mind.
Well, Florida obviously has to play Georgia. Tennessee became a big rival in '92 when the conference split up into divisions. So I was a part of those years. Those two have to be on there. You can make the argument for both these schools that South Carolina and Florida need to be on each other's schedule. It's a game that has meant a lot over the years since South Carolina joined in '92. From a Florida perspective, I look at maybe making an argument to have Auburn back on the schedule with a history, a lot of great games between those two schools. And in fact, that's the closest SEC campus to Gainesville. So that should probably be played. But then, losing Kentucky or losing LSU. I mean, LSU's been a great rivalry the last couple of years. So it's tough. But I would like to see, from South Carolina's perspective, having Florida back on the schedule, if for nothing else, that we both share a coach that's the winningest coach in the history of the programs in Coach Spurrier. So I think that's a good storyline.
Yeah, I think a lot of people miss that rivalry, and so if you don't have any of the inside information, Alyssa Lang's hoarding it all to herself, I guess.
That's
But
right.
Chris, hey, I appreciate the time. Enjoy the rest of your college football weekend.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right, have a good one. Thank you.
All right, good talking to you, man. Take
Yeah.
care.
Yep. You too.